It's been a while since a story got me this hard. I mean, hard as in the story's good, not, you know. At first I wasn't even sure if I wanted to play this game. It really came out of nowhere. And they just got me. God damn it.
So, this is unexpected, or expected, depending on your view. To me, I didn't think I would be making this video. I didn't think I would be even playing this game. I really decided to play it because people loved it the first time I played Genshin, so I thought this would be just more nice content. And here we are, attached to another live service game. But this time, things are a little bit different because Honkai Star Rail has a really good hook which not a lot of games are able to pull off. And so far, I haven't seen too many people talking about it. So today, not only will we talk about the overall state of the game, but we'll also talk about how this game managed to grab the attention of so many players without them even realizing it. Also, just like what happened in my Genshin review, there will be a lot to talk about, so I'm sorry if the topics go all over the place. Also, it should be obvious, I am not going to spoil the story for anyone who has not played the game yet.
So, are you sure you want to do this?
What do you mean?
I know what happens when you get overly positive about a game. You're making another 50-minute long video, aren't you?
No matter what game we are going to talk about, we have to start with the most important part. And if you've seen my previous reviews, you would know it's gameplay. Even though I am somewhat new to how Hoyoverse is dealing with their games, I know they mostly focus on action games. So when I learned that Honkai Star Rail had turn-based combat, at first I wasn't really that excited. To be fair, I really like strategy games and I enjoyed being in silver during the StarCraft 2 days. And these days I still get to diamond in TFT every season. Yes, TFT is a strategy game, I would argue it is not just a game of chances. Anyway, while I enjoy good strategies, turn-based combat never engulfed me. Pokemon was always fine. I never actually played a single Final Fantasy game in my life. And in general, JRPGs never really appealed to me. Which is why I was so surprised I liked the combat of this game. It is a turn-based game where you have a squad of 4 characters, with a timeline that shows you who goes next. All characters have their basic attacks which generate a resource, and then an ability that spends that resource. Also, every move you make charges up your third ability, which is your ultimate. That's pretty much it. As far as I know, there are no special items or anything like that, at least not during combat. It is only 3 moves per character, which makes the combat feel very simple. And I would say that's good, it makes the game very approachable by the casual audience, which for the most part is Hoyoverse's main audience. But in reality, the game is just really good at hiding some of the complexities, because every character also has an element, and every enemy has weaknesses against certain elements. But striking a weakness doesn't just give you bonus multipliers against that target. It also damages their shield, which is kinda like a poise in this game. And once you break that poise, they get stunned, which means that you interrupt their move, and on top of that, they also take extra damage. This is such a simple mechanic that still spices up the combat. Lastly, because your characters only have 3 abilities, the devs make sure to give every character passive abilities that make them deeper. Now, even with those passives, most of the characters are still very easy to play. You either build the resource or you spend it. But sometimes the devs manage to make some characters more complex. For example, there is a support character that has the ability to buff your allies' damage, dispel debuffs off of them, but also make them move to the top of the timeline, which makes them attack immediately. This is all just a single ability that has 3 uses, meaning that there are ways to maximize its potential. So sometimes the combat is not just blindly mashing buttons. It can actually get surprisingly deep. The only negatives I have on the combat come from some of the details. And this is where I may give some feedback to the devs. I have no idea if anyone will be able to see this, but from my very limited experience with not too many turn-based games, I have actually played a game that did some things better than Star Rail. And that would be The Ruined King. Yeah, don't forget that The Ruined King is a turn-based combat game. It is true that their combat is a lot more complex, with each ability also physically placing you on a timeline with speed lanes. But there is one simple improvement which Star Rail should borrow from the Ruined King's combat system. In Ruined King, whenever you wanna use an ability, you can use the UI to target someone, which you cannot do in Star Rail. For example, let's say that my units are low on health and I have a character that can heal. What I have to do is that I pick the ability, I look at the bottom to see who needs healing the most, but then I have to look up and find them on the battlefield. You can't actually click on the health bar of the unit. So I would really appreciate it if the UI was a bit more interactive. In a similar way, the timeline is not interactive either. When you click on it, it does show you the speed, but it would be nice if you could directly target an enemy through the timeline. So for example, if I want to attack and I want to attack the first enemy that goes next, I should just be able to click on the timeline. Lastly, I would really appreciate it if I could just read the buffs and debuffs by hovering over the icons. Because if you wanna see what those icons actually are, you have to open up a whole separate menu. It would be nice if all of this info was available right there during the battle. But all of these issues are absolutely just quality of life changes which I would like to see. It's not really that much of a deal. Anyway, another part of the combat is the autoplay button. Now don't worry, I know you might be having war flashbacks from Raid Shadow Legends. But here you mostly just use it to do the quick boring farms. The AI they use for these battles is not too bad. But it is going to make vital mistakes when you are fighting more difficult bosses. Speaking of which, another thing I should mention is that so far, at least at the beginning, the game has optional fights which do give you some challenge. It is not just mindless battles where you can go AFK in the middle of the fight like you can in Genshin. You can be in the middle of a big storyline, find a side route into a back alley and find a challenging fight with some extra rewards. This honestly took me by surprise. And that's not to mention that after you finish some of the big stories, you will unlock more optional challenges. But I can't show you too much of those because that would be spoilers. Anyway, besides the autoplay button, we can also mention the double speed button, which appears in many turn-based games. But this function also comes in with a funny feature. You see, as the name implies, this button makes the game run at double the speed. So you don't have to stare at the same animations you have seen 1,000 times. But during major boss fights, Star Rail automatically turns it off so you can see all the cool boss animations. And that's when it dawns on you. This game, at normal speed, looks like it is in slow-mo. If you have never played this game, you won't be able to see it. But give it time, play the game at double speed and you won't be able to go back. Anyway, lastly, still regarding the combat gameplay, just like Genshin has the Spiral Abyss, which is an arena of bi-weekly rotating fights, Star Rail has the Magic Mirror, which is pretty much the exact same thing. A number of rooms with challenging fights which give you extra rewards. But on top of that, on top of these challenges, Star Rail will give you a new activity, the Metaverse.
And just like that, our stocks went down.
Thankfully, this game is very self-referential about using this word. Anyway, this simulated universe has levels of challenge, where you fight through 3 floors of enemies, but the entire activity is wrapped up in a really fun progression system. As you defeat enemies, the game offers you random buffs to help you with the climb, which turns this into sort of a roguelite. Kinda like what would happen if Torghast didn't have forced progression. But unlike what you get in Genshin, the powers you get in Star Rail feel more impactful. They are a bit more unique. It is not just flat buffs to attack or defense. Here, some give you buffs if you don't take damage. Others give you bonuses for defeating enemies. And some even turn your defensive stats into damaging buffs. This game even has a whole journal that shows you all the possible buffs that you can get. But remember that all of these buffs are thematically tied to the cosmic gods, some of which you will unlock later, so you won't be able to see everything from the very beginning. On top of that, you also get incentive to pick buffs which you have not played with before, because after collecting a certain number of unique buffs, you can claim some crystals directly from the journal. But that's still not all. On top of the fact that simply clearing the simulated universe gives you a currency, which fills up a bar which gives you more rewards, which by the way reset every week or two, I believe, you also get a currency that helps you go through a special talent tree, where you get special buffs that get active while you are in the simulated universe. So just by screwing around in this game mode, you are progressing through 3 different progression systems: the collection tab, the weekly progression, and the special talent tree. But that is still not all. Later on, as you climb higher, you will also get items called curios, which can entirely change the way you climb. For example, there is a curio that can give you double the random buffs, a curio that heals you after every enemy you defeat, or a curio that has a high chance of giving you more curios but a low chance to almost killing your entire team. This is yet another layer that makes this game mode even more interesting. Honestly, the simulated universe is really fun to play through. And after you finish the story, this is a great part of the game to play for fun and for loot. And I would be happy if this game mode became the game's quote-unquote endgame. So overall, when it comes to the combat of this game, totally ignoring anything else that is connected to it, it is simply good. The chances are, to most people, the combat will feel fun. And most often than not, how gameplay feels is the most important. Even though, yes, at the end of the day, the combat is very simple. You can't really go simpler than everyone making a move when it's their time to make a move. Unless you play Sela. She's using some kind of weird symbols to tell time, and I can't read those.
Are you sure those aren't just Roman numerals?
I don't know. Maybe. So, with the combat gameplay covered, let's have a look at how the game goes outside of combat. Simply said, some people could say it is Genshin. Down to the fact that if you overlay the UI, it is identical. Is that bad? No. In fact, I find it really cool. It was never an issue in any of the From Software games, so why would it be an issue now? They essentially take the framework of Genshin and its progression systems, which to be fair, work quite well, and they give it a whole new universe. Asterisk. And a whole new combat system. The progression is the same down to leveling characters, constellations, item acquisition, item leveling, spending your daily resources. Which, by the way, in Star Rail you spend your daily resources a lot faster than you do in Genshin. If there is one thing I really don't like in Genshin, it is running around and catching butterflies on my phone because I forgot to do it on PC before I went to bed. But also, the games are the same down to the gacha system, how quests are organized into 4 categories where only the main quests are voiced, and really, even the things that they upgraded are just reskins that look better here. For example, in Genshin, your daily commissions are 4 purple dots on your map. 3 of them are combat related and 1 of them is a talking quest. In Star Rail, they present you with a new system where you have to fill up a bar of 500 points. And by doing different activities, you get a different amount of those points. But when you look at the daily tasks that you can do, you'll realize that you have to do 3 gameplay-related tasks, and for the last one, you can do a talking quest. Or you can do a slightly harder gameplay task if you really don't want to talk to an NPC. That is a nice change, to be honest. So gameplay-wise, the system is the exact same, but the polish gives it the illusion that it is something new. The same goes for the talent upgrades. In Genshin, you just press a button that gives you higher damage on your abilities. After reaching a certain level, you also unlock a new passive ability. In Star Rail, all of these things are here in the new talent tree, where you have the same damage increasing talents and the same new passives. It is just a nice illusion that hides it all. And again, it's all totally fine. And the same thing goes for artifacts, which are called relics here. I'm expecting people to farm tons of these throughout their entire playthrough. But again, Star Rail gives this system a slight upgrade. Instead of farming a 4 set with 1 off-piece, Star Rail gives you 6 equipment slots. 4 of them give you a 2 or 4 set bonus, and then you have 2 extra slots that have a whole different set. And again, this makes the already existing foundation even more interesting. And yes, light cones in Star Rail are identical to weapons in Genshin, except light cones don't change appearance. Another interesting change is that while Genshin has all the different open world puzzles, since Star Rail doesn't have that, they had to introduce new puzzles, which will mainly be the piping games. But thankfully for me, I actually really like those. Overall, the progression system was already good in Genshin. They really don't have to change much to let people enjoy it here too. So yes, in this regard, this game really is Genshin in space. But that's not entirely true, because the day this game came out, I noticed a massive difference. There is no jumping in this game. Like, yeah, how am I supposed to glitch out in this game? Making people mad by running away from the story and going out of bounds was my favorite activity in Genshin.
Okay, am I on the ceiling? I'm actually height capped. I cannot go higher. Oh, Yanfei, hello! Hey, sup? What you doing here? Enjoying the view? I think I'm stuck. Yeah.
If we try to stay calm and listen carefully, maybe, just maybe.
Connected to this, when it comes to all the differences, Honkai Star Rail should be renamed to Honkai On Rails, because there is no open world here. However, I don't believe that is a bad thing. And if you like exploration in your games, this game still gives you options. Along the way, as you go through the main story, you'll see bonus areas with extra challenges and extra loot. It honestly feels very close to how Mass Effect feels. It is a game that guides you through pre-planned levels, but by fiddling around you will still be able to find some hidden areas. And again, I don't believe that the fact that this world is closed would be taking away from the joy of exploration. With that said, we also shouldn't undermine the overall level design. Later in the game, you'll notice that sometimes the game borrows ideology from Software, where you go around in a big loop and then find a shortcut to where you were before. As you keep playing, you might notice how clever the level design can be. Speaking of which, I didn't even talk about how you initiate combat. In short, it is kinda like in the new Pokemon games. You just run into an enemy and trigger combat. But you either strike them first and damage their shield, or they can ambush you and move first. On top of that, every character also has an open world ability. This can be a simple heal, an ultimate recharge, or even damage buffs. But now, with the gameplay and the combat covered, we should move on to the one thing that is heavily connected to this: the visuals. First of all, going straight from the combat, I have to mention that the combat animations are great. From their basic abilities to their specials to their ultimates. And especially the ultimates is where the animations shine. Genshin kinda rides a similar boat with the animations. But in Star Rail, the devs are not limited by the fact that they can make the ultimates too flashy. There is no way you can visually flood your screen in a turn-based combat game. Or at least, it can't make the combat unreadable like how it works in action games. So even on the visuals, the combat is simply great. Now, when it comes to the world and the setting, this will absolutely be subjective. Some people may not really be fans of sci-fi fantasy, but personally, I love this setting so much. I'm not a massive Star Wars or Star Trek fan, but I do love the Mass Effect universe, and I love retro space similar to Cowboy Bebop. And this game is exactly that. I don't really want to show you much, because I want to stay as spoiler-free as possible. But from traveling on board the Astral Express to landing down on the unique planets, visually, this game can get stunning very quickly. And you just wait until you find a breathtaking boss fight, because those are by far the best parts. But I believe all of this is linked to the fact that Star Rail is simply using a better version of their engine. As far as I know, Genshin is using a heavily modified Unity engine. And for Star Rail, they pushed it even further. Graphically, all the shadows on the cell shading are much cleaner. The environment has richer contrasts. Partially, this is easily achieved because in a world that is closed, you can tune every detail by hand. But also, the engine has better in-depth lighting, and even when it comes to the character rigging, you can find more details there. In Genshin, the facial rigs allow each character to have about 8 different expressions outside of pre-rendered cutscenes. And yes, on some characters it is more noticeable than on other characters. But since Star Rail is using a new facial rig system that divides the face into segments, you can more than double the amount of expressions, which makes the dialogues far more lively. This is such a nice change compared to Genshin's somewhat robotic conversations. But what's even more important, Star Rail has lip sync. Don't worry, this is not happening because of the rise of AI.
Thank God.
In reality, this has been utilized in video games for decades. How do you think Oblivion or the first Mass Effect move the lips of their characters? They just write code that says, if the sound wave looks like an O, this is how the lips move. And if it sounds like an S, move the teeth together. And then they just feed all the audio into the system and it automatically animates the lips. In Genshin, they used a very simplified version of this, but only for the original Chinese voiceover. Everyone else had to dub over it as if it was a cartoon, which made the localization a bit slower. So to speed up the development, here they made the system flexible, and now it automatically adapts to all languages. And again, it really makes all the conversations feel more alive. Although, you can easily tell when a character without a detailed face rig is trying to speak. There is also one more detail which I noticed when it comes to the characters. We'll talk about the overall character design in just a bit, but I noticed that the new engine is also utilizing new shaders. For example, the eyes of the characters are layered on top of their hair, until you reach a certain angle at which the eye disappears. This is the same kind of shading technique that animes use to dynamically deal with hair. And although this is just incredibly tiny detail, it subconsciously gives you the look of an anime. Pretty cool, right? But you know what's the best about all of this? Even though this game is a visual upgrade on all fronts, this game still runs smoothly on all devices. Obviously, there will be some exceptions, some hardware will have problems, but on average, this game runs well on PC too, which, to be fair, in today's day and age, is already a massive success. But more important than that, this game runs quite well on mobile. It is so good that while a full playthrough of Genshin on mobile sounds like a masochistic kink, here it might not actually be a bad idea to do a full playthrough on mobile for Star Rail. Even the turn-based combat is really good on mobile. And I myself have already played quite a bit on my phone before going to bed. But at the very least, if you are going to do that, I would recommend wearing headphones. Because the music will blow your socks off. From the very beginning, as you're doing the little tutorial fights, I can guarantee the music is one of the first things you are going to notice. It is in your face from the very beginning. And it is there to show you that the music of Hoyoverse means business. There are moments when Genshin's music is great too, but in Star Rail it is the opposite. The vast majority of the music is insane, and there are moments when it is just good. But that's still not all that Star Rail does. Again, I really don't want to spoil this, trust me, I would hate to rob you of that experience. But during some big moments of the game, the music fully embraces what's happening and it turns it up beyond 11. I'll be cryptic about this, but the people who know will know. For me, it was the train and the finale of the first planet that really got me. So overall, just expect to be jamming all the way along the entire ride. Now, before we jump into the biggest hook this game has, let's quickly talk about the gacha system. Yes, it is a gacha system, which means that the vast majority of characters are locked behind luck or your money. But thankfully, unlike it is in Genshin, where the main character is mostly worthless. Yes, I know the Dendro MC is good, and I know that Geo MC can work, but so can Bennett carry and Candice carry, so that's not the point. Anyway, the main character is really good, no matter what you do with them. Just don't look at the simulations, because there are so many disclaimers. Anyone who parsed in WoW will tell you these numbers are usually not what they seem. Anyway, this is such a pleasant change. And all the other characters you get with the main character are so good, you honestly don't really need to pull for anything. And I would also argue that the progression system is more fun as a free-to-play player, because you actually get a decent challenge out of the game that is totally beatable. But I always believed that was the case in Genshin too. So, just to let you know, if you treat this game as just a single-player game with no gacha systems, you are still going to really like this game. And in fact, if you go on Twitch and have a look around, you'll see that most people are going free-to-play, because you really don't have to pull for anything. Okay, it may be because everyone already sold their houses to pull in Genshin, but still, look at how much fun everyone is having regardless. Look, if Tectone can stay free-to-play, so can you.
I did it! I finally won!
But that could also be because of a different reason. It's an area where I would say Genshin is a bit stronger, and that's character design. Now, this is going to be another very subjective topic. But while I believe that Genshin's overall character design is very good, here some characters may feel a bit more generic. And that's mostly because with the early story, it may take a while for you to get to know those characters and really appreciate them, but at the beginning, in Star Rail, you also don't have a lot of diversity in locations, which would also introduce new aesthetics. This means that without strong thematics, this game is trying to push the typical sci-fi feel onto all of their characters. And as a result, if people don't like the generic sci-fi elements, they won't feel a good connection with those characters and they won't be encouraged to pull for them. With that said, on release, Genshin had the exact same thing. For example, while I still haven't whaled in Genshin, I told my chat that there are two characters in Genshin which I will most likely go after. John Lee, because he is simply the coolest character in the story, and the Wanderer, because I love his gameplay. However, one of these came out in patch 1.3 and the other one came out 2 years later. So while in Star Rail most people don't feel encouraged to pull, just keep in mind, they don't feel encouraged yet. And already the game showcased some characters coming in the future which might be able to change that. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this was their strategy. Just release all the good characters at the beginning so that people can just pull during the hype train, and then you release some of the amazing designs which make them pull again. With that said, there is one more thing we can mention. Just like in my Genshin review where I told people that Hoyoverse knew exactly what they were doing with their characters, here they absolutely know what they are doing. And all you need to do is to look at Sela, an elite soldier from a freezing planet, in a see-through swimming suit who is too busy to zip up her pants. Yes, lore-wise, she is a renowned character. People recognize her. At that point, zipping up your pants could be the least you could do. But honestly, the character design is still good. It's just that the context feels really odd. Still, rest assured, that is not the only fan service you will find in this game. As you are unlocking all the different constellations for your characters, which in this game are called Eidolons, the art of all characters is following the same formula. The first level is the character from the back. The second level is their eye. Third level is their trinket. Fourth level is their iconic emotional expression. The fifth level is a zoom in on their chest, which is supposed to be their heart. And for the final level, you get to see them naked. Yes, this goes for every single character. Except for any of the minors. And this also goes for any of the 5,000-year-old dragons. All of those are fully clothed. Thank f***ing God. But besides these, there are also the light cones, which, as I mentioned, are a replacement for the weapons. And these showcase some cool art which may be teasing future characters, or it may be more fan service. Just let me read you the description of one. It started with sincerity and anticipation, followed by a passionate catharsis. with one climax after another, until the record spinning came to a final stop, and those horse shrieks were no longer audible. Mission accomplished. They knew exactly what they were doing. So yeah, just be ready for waves of fan service. But now we covered all the ins and outs of how this game plays. And from what I've said so far, this game might seem promising to you. So I believe it's time we talk about the main reason why I wanted to make this video. It's the one place where I believe this game absolutely shines. The powerful hook this game has, which immediately made me connect, and which makes me want to play this game more and more. The story.
Really? This is the reason why we are here. This is the reason why you made everyone sit here for half an hour.
No. Although, all puns intended, the story of this game is stellar. And it is absolutely worth playing this game only for the story, even if for some reason you hate the gameplay. I'm a big sucker for sci-fi and fantasy. And this is a sci-fi fantasy with elements of steampunk, which is just an awesome blend. I really love the story introduction, how you start playing as an important mysterious character, but then you actually get to choose your main character, and then how you learn about the big threats of the universe, and how you get involved in a great space adventure. There were many times when I got big Mass Effect vibes from this game. It can really sell you the fantasy of going out on missions with your crewmates. And what really helps a lot with this is that the characters they give you at the very beginning are interesting. Everyone has an interesting twist and a bit of mystery that makes you wonder what's gonna happen to them next. And I would say the best one of these is Marge. Which is crazy because she is the very first character you get to meet. She is supposed to be the Paimon of this universe, but her background is really cool. She was obviously put there as a setup for something big that is going to happen in this game later. And so far, from the setup we got, I can't wait to see what happens to her in the next 3 years. Also, yes, we should point out that there is no Paimon here. For a lot of people, Paimon was a massive hit or miss. To me, Paimon was not a strong character at the beginning of the story, but throughout the course of the entire game, she did have some good moments later. But here, because Star Rail doesn't have a Paimon that would lighten every scene up, they can tell some more serious stories. More about that in just a second. Truth be told, I also really love this universe. This game immediately gives you some story hooks regarding how the cosmic forces of this universe operate. But above that, I just love the overall aesthetics. As I mentioned, I truly got hooked on this game at the very beginning when you approach the train for the first time. There is a lot of things that happen at the same time here, and that's how the game got me. If you're interested, the full clip of that moment is on my second channel right now. After this strong introduction, there is a little bit of a dip down as they try to introduce a new planet to you. Which, by the way, no spoilers, but I'm pretty sure I have seen that planet somewhere before. But thankfully, the pacing very quickly picks up again. You can really tell that Hoyoverse is using what they learned from Genshin, because the storytelling in Star Rail is equivalent to how they tell stories in Genshin in their latest content. It's just that here, the experience is not soured by the bad pacing that came before. In fact, I don't think I have any negatives when it comes to the story of Star Rail. And I'm pretty sure everyone who went through the finale of the first planet will agree with me. The finale is, in my opinion, the best storytelling Hoyoverse ever pulled off. I asked my chat, and some people believed that Sumeru was better than Star Rail. But personally, I kinda like Star Rail more than Genshin. I'm not gonna talk about spoilers, even though I really want to. So the finale was just really good. Another thing I was afraid of is that I would lose on a lot of lore, because I thought that this game would be connected to their previous game, which is Honkai Impact. But apparently that is not the case. Apparently the only thing the two games have in common are the names of the characters and how the philosophy of the cosmic powers works. Besides that, all characters are totally different and they have all new stories. And I am really glad to hear that. But we absolutely have to praise the new dialogue system. Or the old dialogue system, it's just that here it is a bit more clever. You see, in Genshin, whenever you are in the middle of a dialogue, it doesn't really matter what you say because the outcome will always be the same. This is called the illusion of choice, and it is heavily utilized in pretty much every game you play. Like, really, 90% of all dialogue in all of RPGs is technically meaningless. And it's all about how good the illusion of choice is. Well, unlike in Genshin, where the illusion of choice is paper thin, in Star Rail, every choice feels like it gives you a unique outcome, because what the characters say really changes. And that instantly makes the dialogue system more engaging. It's a really tiny detail, but for all the story enjoyers, this goes further than you might think. Lastly, I also want to point out how far Star Rail goes with their overall world building. Besides all the notes and item descriptions, and yes, even the 3D models with all the journal entries for all the enemies, they also shove their cosmic lore into all aspects of the game. My favorite one is the simulated universe. The more you play it, the more you learn about the cosmic gods of this universe. Not just through journal entries. But by playing, you also engage in conversations with those gods and you get to see what personality they have. This is honestly such a clever way to connect the gameplay with the story. So overall, again, I highly recommend playing this game just for the story alone. Hoyoverse is really utilizing the best of what they learned over the last 3 years. And it really shows.
Commander, we have arrived.
But finally, we are here. This is where Star Rail's greatest hook lies. The one aspect that separates this game from everything else. That.
A trash can.
Yep.
This is the reason why you made this video. An hour-long video for this.
Absolutely, because you see, this is funny. I don't mean this. I mean, this game is funny. It's been a very long time since I've seen a game pull off this kind of comedy this well. It's simply really good, and that shouldn't be taken for granted. Now, of course, comedy is highly subjective. So first of all, we have to mention that writing comedy is hard. I mean, look at this video. Also, look at some other games that try to be funny. Forspoken and more than that, Tiny Tina's Wonderland are great examples of when the comedy does not really land. And in Star Rail, the style of the comedy really makes this genius. Because a lot of people will recognize this humor from Undertale. It is the highly self-referential humor that breaks the fourth wall whenever it makes sense. In a similar way, you might also recognize this humor from Stanley Parable. And in both games, everyone agrees that the humor is great. And right now, I would not be afraid of putting Star Rail right between them. But don't worry, it's not that this game would only be about the humor. Most of it comes from the side quests, which means that it doesn't take away from the seriousness of the story. But even in this case, if you really wanna turn this game into a comedy, you can do that because you hold control over the main character, who is the comedic relief. Here, it is not in the hands of Paimon. You can decide when you wanna make a situation funny or when you wanna go for immersion. And this freedom of choice helps a lot. In many ways, it is what separates Star Rail from Genshin. Genshin has a serious story that sometimes can get funny. Star Rail perfectly mirrors that. This game is mostly funny, but it can also get quite serious. Which is great to see, because if Star Rail was too similar to Genshin, a lot of people would just not bother to play Genshin in space. Also, I didn't know that this game was marketed as a space comedy. That's why the great humor threw me off guard. And that's why it was such a pleasant surprise. At this point, the main meme is the main character going through trash. You'll find a lot of jokes there. Which, by the way, it is amazing that this game has a currency for engaging in jokes. You will get what is called praise of high morale, which you can then spend on other jokes. They have their own comedy progression system here. But besides those, just by interacting with random objects, you might get a good laugh. My favorite one was the closet. But you'll also find jokes in item descriptions, solid water made me scratch my head, and yes, I won't spoil how or when it happens, but you might also get rickrolled. And there is also a secret comedic ending which you can trigger at the beginning of the game. Speaking of which, if you take too long to pick your character, you will find more humor there. And the comedy just keeps piling on. Again, the best way for me to describe the feeling I got from this is that it felt like I was playing Undertale again. It's self-referential jokes in places where you wouldn't expect them. And I absolutely love it.
So, are you happy? Made your peace with a trash can? Can we just go now?
Yeah, I think we're done. Yeah.
So, how much did you get?
What do you mean?
People got sponsored to play this game.
What? I did it for free?